A young man came to Agassiz, the great scientist, and asked him what to do to become a scientist. He said, go and study the spider for a year. And now, I'm a great believer in mastering one thing so thoroughly that you can see its interrelationships. As he studied this spider, he found its interrelationship with other insects and then with the other animal world. I found in the second book of Samuel, you could find there, if you just studied that thoroughly, you'd find threads leading down to the French Revolution. But I have found that the simpler things are narrowed down, the more you can master it. There are 614 rules in the Pentateuch. Those are reduced to 11 in the 15th Psalm. They're reduced to 3 in Michael. Do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with thy Lord. And they're reduced to 1 in Jesus. Love. Love the Lord thy God with all thy mind and all thy heart and all thy soul. And another likened unto it, thy neighbor as thyself. If we would have a college that devoted 4 years to learning how to love God in this fourfold way, I would assure you that you'd be better educated than any other college you could even dream of. So this evening, in less than 1 hour, I want to give you a thorough college education. Now, if you love God with all your body, with all your strength, that means you're to take the love of God out on the athletic field. We do here. We're the only camp perhaps that does do that. We believe you can make our bodies rhythmic and like the radio, sensitive to the vibrations and the messages that come through. We can make our bodies radio-like by getting them in rhythm, in devotion through motion. We believe we can bring God into the creative writing and creative speaking and creative painting, and that all of our love of God isn't to be just centered over there in the religious field. Therefore, there's a wholesomeness in this request of Jesus to love God with all our bodies, all our minds, all our hearts, and all our souls. Well, I found, as I mentioned the other day, that rhythm was 1/3 of the Greek education and that everything must be done rhythmically. If I concentrate upon one thing, I be hypnotized. Our very breathing, it must be rhythmical. If I just said we must get a lot of fresh air and we want to keep drawing it in and don't lose any of it, don't breathe any out, why, you would destroy yourself. And the heart has its alternate rhythm, and the tides, their ebb and their flow. And you'll find all of life is marked by rhythm. So by putting rhythm into this love, you have a secret of a perfect education. I had trained under the greatest trainer in America, a man who knew that the tension was of value, but the relaxation was just as valuable or more. And so we go through these little processes and let go shoulders, let go elbows, let go wrists and fingers. He said, you tense up and all the blood's driven out of your muscle, and it's not until you relax does that blood come in and bring the reinforcement. And so he had us train rhythmically, and the Friday before the big game, he always had us go to bed. I played on the Grinnell football team, a small college, and we only had one set of backs. We'd put 11 men into the game, and they'd come out. When I went to a little tiny college, and I was anxious to start a good football team, I got the big country boys in the line, and a lot of basketball chaps that had come from Indiana, the great Indiana state, the great basketball state. They all know how to make passes. I put them in the backfield, and we began to defeat all the big colleges like Knox and Monmouth and Iowa Wesleyan, we were just, we didn't have anything but freshmen. But we only had 12 men, only had one substitute. And so I had to train them so they would be in perfect condition and play the last half better than the first. Well, when I went back to high school to coach as principal of my hometown school, my brother was captain of the track team, and he said, now I can jump 4 feet 11, but there are 4 boys at West High that can jump 5 feet 4. And so I don't think there's much chance of my going on with a high jump. I said, don't you worry, when the city meet comes, you're going to beat all of them, and he did. When he went to college, he became the pole vaulter. And he would usually win second place. Always somebody at Ames or Drake could beat him. So the last year I said, now I'm coaching in a little college down in Illinois, but I'm going to be your coach like I was when I was in high school. That coach is simply burning you up, burning you out. And the jumping muscles are like rubber. You should just vault every other day and let the bounce come back in alternate days. And the week before the great Missouri Valley meet, when the little college of Grinnell, only college in the meet, against all the big universities of the Middle West, you're not to even train all that week. Well, the coach was right on him all the time, the laziest man he ever saw. He was blowing him up and everything, but he held fast to this rhythm business, letting relaxation have its chance. And when the Missouri Valley meet came, which was after the colleges were out, therefore I was home in Des Moines, sat in the grandstand there in the big Drake Stadium, beside my father and my sisters, and we saw finally it come down to where the championship lay between Missouri and Grinnell, little Grinnell, and it all depended on who would win the pole vault, and he was vaulting against 3 men who had defeated him in the past. But he finally defeated them all and won the championship. That made him a hero. Now, this college I'm talking about is to be a very selective college, is to train, if you can love God with all your strength, you're going to be a hero. If you can love him with all your mind, you're going to become a genius. If you can love him with all your heart, you can become a prophet. And if you love him with all your soul, you can become a saint. It's a college where we're going to turn out heroes, geniuses, prophets, and saints. You may stand in line as you come out there and make your application, and we'll... Well, now, I have arranged it up here. Love God with all your strength and tension and relaxation. There they are. But when it comes to the mind, it's what's above the line, you'll find, is enthusiasm, and below is stillness. I was dean of McAllister College and had to pass on all the entering students. And I had to look at their application blanks to see if they qualified, if they'd come from an accredited high school. And as the years went by, I grew sick and tired of this question. Did you graduate from an accredited high school? I didn't give a snap of my finger whether they came from an accredited high school. They could, any cigarette smoking, gambling, good-for-nothing chap, he could get through an accredited high school. I wanted to see whether he was an accredited boy. And the test would be, have you capacity for enthusiasm and have you capacity to get still? Abraham Lincoln and Edison couldn't have gotten in my college, the other colleges, but I would have taken them in. I'd have let Socrates in. That would have shocked the University of Indiana. I would have taken Shakespeare in. Why, Shakespeare couldn't even spell his own name. He spelled it 16 different ways. He never went through high school. They didn't have any accredited high schools, but he had the capacity to be enthusiastic and to get still. Edison would get so enthusiastic, he'd work over an invention for 18 hours. He'd forget his meals. Well, the way I was teaching in a high school, and I was reading from a passage from Robert Louis Stevenson. And I said, I see the hour's about up. I guess I'll finish this next time. And a little boy in the front row shouted out, "Go on, go on." And then they all laughed at him, and his face got red. And I said, Vernon, you fit in my college because you had such enthusiasm you forgot where you were. As a matter of fact, Vernon did go to my college, and he became the successor. I'd been editor of the literary magazine in the college, and he succeeded me in that. And I haven't seen him now for, I suppose, 40, 50 years. And I was giving this talk, and a woman came up down, I think in Tennessee, and said, why, Vernon Blank, that's an unusual last name, isn't it? Vernon Blank is the vice president of my father's company, my husband's company. And he's a wonderful man. Now, of course, he's up in the 60s. But all through his life, he's had a quality that you could fasten to, enthusiasm. Then when I would teach my short story class, I'd put a sentence on the board, flat down the chalk, and make a big, nice frame around it so it'd look pretty. And I'd say, look at that. And Uncle John sat in his armchair before the fire, smoking his pipe. Now close your eyes and wait until the picture begins to get clear. And when it comes, then write with enthusiasm. But don't do anything. Just get still for a while until the lights begin to show on the face, and the wrinkles begin to come out, and the shadows begin to show in the room, until it's a different room from any other room that's ever been, a different face than any other face. Then write it with enthusiasm, and don't bother about punctuation. I've got a salt and pepper shaker with a lot of commas and periods, and don't care about them. Pay attention to the penmanship. I was just stymied when I was in school. I had to have such nice penmanship, I couldn't get any ideas. All I want you to do is to get some ideas out. None of the famous writers could write so anybody could read it anyway. Well, the result is we did wonderful things. But when I got them still, perhaps it was back on the back row, Bill would say to Harry, you're going to sleep. And Harry would say, Bill, what girl are you going to take to the party tonight? And I'd say, wait a minute, Bill and Harry, you don't fit in my college because you can't get still. Now, I really mean this. Here's a boy came to Grinnell College, one of my classmates from the country. He had outgrown his clothes. He looked like Ichabod Crane. His arms hung out of his sleeves, and he had an awkward walk, and he had a voice way up in the sky, put pebbles in his mouth, brought it down. But I don't think he ever got better than a C grade. But he went out at the end of his freshman year, and he sold more Century Book of Facts than anybody in America. Made enough money in one summer to put him all through college. The next middle of the year, he came to me and he said, the company is going to give me commission on all the boys I can get to go out and sell books. And the trainer's coming tonight, and wouldn't you like to go out? I said, I should say I wouldn't. My mother had taught me that a book agent, always, if you took off his hat, you'd find he had some little horns, and if you took off his shoes, you'd find he had cleft feet. And all of that, the book agents, they came right out of the inferno. I said I should say not. Well, he said it'd overcome your shyness. I said, I know I need that, but I wouldn't pay that price. Well, he said, you're going to, there's a very interesting man comes and trains them, and come up at night and just see how he does it. I said, well, I'll be glad to see that, how these queer fellows are trained. Well, he explained to us that we didn't have to walk in with a book in our arms. We could make a little, mothers could make a little bag to hang under our coat and carry the prospectus in it. We could walk in with our hands swinging. And we should all he had to do is to memorize 3 speeches, one for mothers, one for businessmen, one for other people. And if we didn't sell a book and could hold out for 90 days, they'd pay us a salary for 3 months. Well, that finally won me, and I volunteered. At the end of the first month, I hadn't sold enough books to buy my breakfast, and the company saw they were going to lose money on me. For I am like the man who said, if you don't look out, I'll stick my nose between your teeth and I won't let go. I was going to hold out for 90 days. So they said, we're going to shift you to a better territory. But we want you to stop on the route at Marshalltown and go around with William Paul, who sold all those books. Well, we started out early in the morning, and he stopped at a little rustic, old, tumble-down house. Impoverished old lady, no chance of selling, but I wouldn't have bothered to gone in, but he did. He didn't even try to sell a book. He just got out his notebook and asked her the names of all the people along the block, how many children they had, and everything else, and thanked her and went on, and the next house was a great big house on the hill. A maid came to the door. Good morning, is Mrs. Clark in? Yes, and the maid took us into the parlor, and Mrs. Clark came in, and two very nice-looking young college men rose and bowed. Mrs. Clark, I want you to meet Mr. Clark. I wonder if you could be related. I had to explain that all my uncles in that area were aunts. I didn't have any Clark relatives, but that didn't make any phase on him. Every time he met a Mrs. Clark, I wonder if you could be related. He sat down perfectly relaxed, still. I was tense like this, and after about 2 minutes, I'd be kicked right out. Well, he sat there, and a fly lit on his knee, and he caught the fly. I discovered how to catch flies. You don't do it that way. You do it this way. And I thought, if a man can sit here and catch flies that relaxed, how can he do that? He said, now, Mrs. Clark, I understand you have a good many, you have 4 little children. Why, yes, how did you know that? And little children ask lots of questions that mothers find it hard to answer. That's true. How did you know that? Well, Professor Ruoff of the University of Pennsylvania has written a book that will answer all those questions. Now, you just take a look at this prospectus, and you pick out which one of the bindings you'd like and sign your name here. And she signed it. We went to the next house, and the next house, and the next house. Why, he sold more books that morning than I had in 1 month. And finally, 6 o'clock came, and I said, well, at last, the day's work's over. I said, I get exhausted at 3. How can you hold out? He said, we haven't finished yet. At 7 o'clock, we go down to the factory district where the women work, too, and we visit their homes from 7 till 9. At 10 o'clock, he took me to his room, and he made me take his cot, and he made a bed on the floor. And now at 10 o'clock, the lights were out, and I didn't have to hear those little speeches anymore. And then out of the door came a voice. Good evening, Mrs. Bedbug. I understand you have a good many little bedbugs, and little bedbugs ask lots of questions that mothers can't answer. Professor Ruoff of the University of Pennsylvania has written a book that will answer all those questions. Well, I thought to myself, if anyone who can sell books all day and sell to Mrs. Bedbug at night, you can't stop him. And do you know what happened? I don't think he even used good grammar. He'd say coming and going. Went into the ministry. But they made him head of the rescue mission in Minneapolis. 100,000 lumberjacks pass through his hands every year. A great hotel's been built there, St. James Hotel. If you ever get to Minneapolis and you don't have any money, just go to St. James Hotel and they'll give you a bucket of water and a broom. And you can earn your night lodgings and your breakfast. And he built a great farm out there, Moccasin Lake, where the down and outers, they can go and be rejuvenated, and the alcoholics. And why, he was voted the most valuable citizen of Minneapolis, and was voted and received his doctor's degree before I did at Grinnell. And in our 45th anniversary, he and I were honored as though we were sort of heroes of some kind. And just this year, the 50th, he passed into the other world just before that meeting. When I went to college, at Harvard, for postgraduate work, I was registering, and I overheard a lady's voice say, I don't think I'll take Shakespeare. Now, I didn't know that women registered at Harvard. I thought they went to Bernard, or wherever it was, at Radcliffe. And after a while, I think I'll take Chaucer. And I looked under the table. I couldn't see any lady. But when I went to Randall Hall, where we were to have our meals, I was pondering, how will I get acquainted with anyone in 1 year? You can make more friends in 1 year in a small college than you can in 4 years in a big university. And I was reversing the process. I'd been 4 years at Grinnell, now I was to be 1 year at Harvard. As I walked into Randall Hall, a fine-looking, matured young man said, you're a graduate student? I said, yes. Well, would you be willing to sit at my table? I said, yes, I'd be glad to. He said, I'm picking out 26 graduate students so we can sit together for the whole year, and we'll build up a fellowship. Oh, that was grand. And that first evening we were being introduced, and I was being introduced to a slender-looking, long-necked chap sitting beside me, Mr. Glenn Clark of Des Moines, Iowa. Meet Mr. Roger Williams of Ouachita, Arkansas. And then he said, "Oh, Mr. Clock, just like a clock, isn't it?" And I said, "If I've got to sit at the same table with this falsetto, how can I stand it?" Because in those days, the only thing I was allergic to were sissy boys. So I always would sit at the other end of the table, but presently I noticed, as the days went by, that everybody's listening with enthusiasm to him. He's always coming in, telling what Professor, something enthusiastic about Professor Kittredge's class or this class. And so it became quite that capacity for enthusiasm. He just bowled over all those weaknesses. I went to see Marlowe and Southern in Hamlet with him. We sat up with the gods, and in the last act, in the last scene, I heard him go. I said, "What's the matter? Did you hear that?" I said, "No, what was that?" "Absent thee from felicity a while, Horatio." Wasn't that wonderful? And after that, I would love to sit beside him, and when he'd go, then I'd listen hard. Enthusiasm. Oh, he's so enthusiastic about his grandmother. He didn't praise his mother. I said, "What's the matter with your mother?" "Oh, she was born in the Civil War. And you Northerners sent down a lot of money to educate the Negroes, but nothing to educate us. And so she got no education. But my grandmother, she knows Shakespeare by heart. Oh, she's wonderful." One day he said, "Oh, I got a picture of grandmother. Come up to my room. I want to show it to you." And there he was, looking at a lot of camera shots and fooling around. And over here there's an old, wrinkled old, looked like might be a Creole Indian. He said, "I can't find her anywhere." I said, "Who's this old squirrel?" "That's my grandmother. That's my grandmother." Well, I want to say, I never seen him since, but the last, when I was speaking in Arkansas, someone said, "Why, he gave the graduating, the commencement address at the high school graduation of my daughter," and so on. Now, all these folks, now that's what you need, is enthusiasm and the power to get still. The geniuses have it. Wordsworth would get still, be enthusiastic over a field of daffodils. The next day in his garden, he'd get very still until they began to see the picture come out. And then with enthusiasm, he'd just write it out. Poetry flowed through. We try that. We don't just talk about it, but that's what you did this morning in that wonderful writing class, and what you did in the painting class and everything else. You'll find that if you have those two capacities, you're well educated. Then it comes to the love God with all your heart, a strong desire, and the power to relinquish the desire. In India, they say you should have no desires. If you want to be a saint, just crush all your desires and sit by the side of the road with a beggar's bowl. Jesus didn't. He said he wanted men with strong desires. And the three that he specially selected were John and James, sons of thunder. They asked, "Can I be first of them, sit at your right hand, and can I sit at your left hand?" Peter, that was so had such strong desires that he said, build 3 tabernacles up here and all that. But then he would pick a little baby up and say, "Unless you can turn, becomes a little child. He that be first shall be as a servant. He that be greatest of all shall be as a slave." Unless you're willing to relinquish that desire to be first, but the fact you have the desire, and then you relinquish it, releases the power. Now, it's hard to explain that. I think the greatest, the best illustration is the shoemaker, the horseshoe. Who was that in the poem by Longfellow? The blacksmith. He'd hold the shoe over the flame until it'd be just a red hot, then even white heat. Then he would plunge it in the cool water. Now, if you're going to plunge it in the water, why did you heat it in the first place? Or if you're going to heat it, why do you want to bother to cool it off? Well, to bring out the temper, you need them both. If in this ideal college, I'd ask the young men, what do they want? I want to be captain of the football team before I graduate, but don't tell anybody, or they'd climb my frame. I'll say, "I know, boys, and I'll promise not to tell it. I'm going to be like a whale. Drop these in. You want to be a captain of the football team? Fine. All right. Now relinquish it. Do all you can to help the other fellow. All right? And the girl will say, I'd like to be Queen of the May. That's fine. I'd like to have you have a strong desire, but now relinquish it. A boy named Bob Moran on my track team. Days had gone by, many meets we'd held. He's coming out always toward the last man in the 100 and the 220, and he came out and he'd be sitting there sulking there under the tent while the meet was going on. One day, a few days before a big triangular meet, going to meet teams we'd already met before, he came out of the college as I was coming out, the noon hour, and he had that look of gloom on his face, and I said, come on, Bob, walk with me down toward my home. I want to talk with you. Well, he said, I don't know if I deserve it. He said, I'm just a flop and a failure. I said, Bob, your sunshine is what we need in that team. We don't absolutely need you to win the races. But now in this meet that's coming to Saturday, you'll line up there, you and Thompson, we're putting in for the 100. Thompson's the man that should win that race, and I want you to run as fast as you can to try to keep up with him as close as you can, not to win anything, but so that as soon as he breaks that tape, you can run right up and be the first man to hit him on the back and say, good work, old boy. Well, he clung so close to Thompson that he almost got second place. He came in third. But I said, when it comes to 220, that's your race. Get down on your marks and just relinquish all desire of winning it. Just drop that. And just run the race for the joy of it. It's a curved track. You like to run around curved tracks. Just run around there like a poem. And I was standing near at the finish line, and as he came around there right up with all the leaders, I just did as I've done in practice. I put my hand out and just gave one wave, and just like responding to a wave of the Hurricane Connie, he just came right ahead of them. He came in about 20 yards ahead of everybody, and then he came back to me and he said, I can't understand this. They say I broke the record. And I was on a curved track and I was against the wind. I said, well, 5 watches caught you, and they don't lie. I have found when you can relinquish things. A girl of our, Marion Daly. Marion Daly, a college girl, won first place in our extemporaneous speaking contest, and was to represent us in the national contest against 100 colleges. And they would, in each test, they would draw a new topic each time and have just 1 hour to prepare, and it'd be a long strain. And she came to my room and asked for advice. I didn't give her any advice on collecting or arranging material or making gestures. I said, now, when you get up there to speak, you look out at that audience and just know they all love you. And don't try to win any prize, but do your best to make everybody there happy. She finally qualified after all those 100 had been eliminated one by one, and only 6 remained in the finals, a long, hard week of contest. And when they drew the topics, 2 of the other girls began to weep. She put her arms around one of them, and she said, oh, that's all I needed. I just felt we were fighting each other like tigers, and I'd taken all my life out of me, and oh, thank you. That's just what I needed, was a loving touch. She went to the other girl and she said, I drew a topic I don't know anything about. And she said, let me see it. Well, I know a lot about that. Let me help you outline your topic. And she spent half the time helping her. Now, with only half the time to prepare her own talk, she sat down, did the best she could. She had no anticipation of winning. She got up there, and all she tried to do is to make everybody happy, and she made the 5 judges so awful happy, they all gave her first place. Then, some weeks after that, Milton Mason came into my office and said, you know, I am in love with Marion Daly, and we're engaged, and she wants to break the engagement, and what would you do? And I said, well, how much do you love her? Oh, I love her all the way. I'd do anything for her. Anything to make her happy, yes. Well, you think there's another man in the case? I don't know. Well, now, if there should be, and you really loved her, you'd say, well, all right, if you'd be happy with someone else, I'm willing to give you. Well, he said, I'll have to sleep on that. It's just dawned on me that the love you've had for me is the greatest love in the world, the kind of love I've been looking for all my life. love that is so great that you'd give me away to make anything that would make me happier, even if you had to lose me. Years went by. 10 years later, I was in Mankato giving a series of talks, a guest at the the county attorney's home. And I said, Milton Mason, how did you win the county attorneyship way ahead of all the others on the ticket, the president and everyone else? Well, he said, Marion went out and made 3 speeches, and that won the whole county. And now he's the judge of that district. If he ever runs for president and Marion makes any speeches, you'll find him getting elected president. Before I left, though, she put her hand in mine and said, Prof, sometimes I waken in the middle of the night and I just tremble all over, thinking how close I came to losing this wonderful man. You know, if you have someone that wants something much and then can relinquish it, you're in the hands of a prophet. You're in the presence of someone that is some superior mold. Abraham Lincoln lost the senatorship. If he hadn't lost the senatorship, and I don't think he'd have been elected president. George Washington was offered the presidency for the 3rd term, and he relinquished it, and he goes down as the father of the country. I can't help but say that 100 years from now, we're going to find that in spite of the fact that there are 4 terms, the only man ever elected 4 times, Roosevelt, he's going to be put down as one of our great men, like Julius Caesar, or perhaps like Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte took 500,000 men over 6 feet in height and marched them up to Moscow. 20,000 came back. The one thing they'll remember Napoleon for, great as he is that he's the man that reduced the height of the French race by 2 inches, rendered them a decadent nation. I'm not going to go any further into this, but the man and the woman are willing to be humble, to relinquish. They're the ones we're safe with. That's why I feel we're safe with Eisenhower. And I didn't feel we were safe with Roosevelt. Oh, he has great qualities like Caesar and Nero and Napoleon, but he had some limitations. If you really want to be a prophet, there's the door. And then to be a saint, you must love. Pour it out prodigally. One of the most dangerous things in the world is to love. Man next door to me, president of a great insurance company, he was always working on his boat that he wanted to take up, and he had hay fever, go up to Minnesota. This is when I was a boy down in Des Moines. I asked him why he didn't marry. He said, oh, I had a sweetheart, and I was a young man, and she jilted me. And that hurt me and hurt my pride, and I don't want to ever be jilted again, so I don't dare love anymore. Why, the big sissy, the big coward, of course you're going to get hurt if you love. I love little Mary Lou. I loved her with all my heart and soul. She's my only granddaughter. I was run a terrific risk if you have any children or grandchildren. And the Lord saw to take her up into heaven. And little Mary Lou wanted to go everywhere with me. She wanted to go to Camps Farthest Out. And so when we found that she is supposed to have only about 6 weeks to live, well, she lived for 6 months. And she went, I took little Mary Lou with me on the Vista Dome down to meetings I held and the camps. But finally, when on February 8th, I woke up at 3 o'clock, and I got out my notebook, and I said, I know at last how God must have loved this world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that the world could be saved. For I am preparing myself to give my only granddaughter, that this world can be saved. And it is releasing a fiber and a new spirit in me to be true to that little life that's going to go out. I'm going to go around the world and build a belt of prayer. I'm not going to stop till I can get into the White House if necessary. Something's being born in me this morning at 3 o'clock, and I wrote it all down. And the next, at dawn came, a telegram came saying at 3 o'clock, little Mary Lou stepped into heaven. Well, I want to say that you run some risks, but wonderful things come out of those things. And we knew as soon as she stepped into heaven that she was going to pick out another little granddaughter, which soon we heard they'd have another little granddaughter in about 9 more months. And we had no doubt at all it was going to be a granddaughter, and it was, and little Kathleen. Some of you may have seen her at Coronas. the most sunshiny little 3-year-old you ever saw in the world. And she just, when she comes down, is Grandpa. She has to rush up and see her grandpa, and it feels a marvelous whole. But up there, there is a connecting link that has released a power that you can't explain. But I found this, that if you can love and then find peace, that goes underneath it, the peace that passeth understanding, it makes you something of a saint. And when a woman called me up, one of our most beautiful graduates, said, my son has infantile paralysis. 6 doctors have just left the home. They say he will not live through the day. Won't you pray, Prof? I said, tell me the details. He's been paralyzed from the neck down for a week. He's been having 2 convulsions a minute for the last 4 hours. He has a temperature of 105. His spine's been punctured 11 times. There's no more relief there. Well, I said, supposing he should grow to manhood, how do you know that his life would be happy? How do you know but that heaven right now would be the most wonderful place for him? Supposing he'd grow to manhood and the president would invite him to come to the White House to be Secretary of State and sit at his right hand. Would you insist that he stay in Minneapolis and be a drug clerk or something the rest of his life? No. Well, heaven's much more wonderful than Washington, and God's much more wonderful than the president. If you will get down on your knees and just say, Lord, I'm going to give this boy completely 100% to you to do whatever is best for the boy, I can pray with tremendous power. Abraham was the perfect model who took Isaac, the one he'd yearned for and longed for. When God called him to give him back, he was willing to relinquish him. And when you are willing to relinquish, you'll find wonderful things happen. I'll admit when we relinquished little Mary Lou, and the way Marion and Norman Elliott took it, it was an inspiration to all the family, all the neighbors, and all the CFOers, the peace with which they accepted it, and relinquished her to heaven to something better. She didn't come back, but little Kathleen came back, and a new urge and a new power came into both Norman and me in our messages. And so there's something comes when you relinquish. And so after an hour, this woman called me up. She said, I've been on my knees for an hour. I said, Lord, this isn't a son of mine. He's a son of God's. He's just loaned to me. I'm giving him back to you now, Lord. You know what I want. I want him back if it's possible, but all I want and all I'm asking is whatever is best for the boy. All the relatives came and filled the house. She was a wonderful cake baker. She made an angel food cake and cooked coffee and chocolate and went in serving them and cheering them up with that beautiful sweet face of hers, and then she'd go into the kitchen to get some more coffee, and they'd touch their heads and nod them, shake them. The strain's been too great. You can just see it's worn her down because she has a peace that isn't consistent with a sound understanding. Her mind isn't just right, I'm sure. I learned then what that wonderful thing is, that wonderful statement in the Bible referring to a peace that passeth all understanding. When your ship's going down and you get peace, when you're going to lose your business and you can keep peace of mind, when you're facing death but you can get peace of mind, oh, then you rise to sainthood. Our cargoes come to us over calm seas. When Rickenbacker and 6 men were out there on rubber rafts, off the main line, no water, no food, no way to save themselves. They were almost ready for the madhouse, would have been. One of them was, drank salt water, died. They had to bury him at sea. But there's the youngest of all, he had peace of mind. And finally Rickenbacker said, what's that little book you keep opening? He says, that's a testament my chaplain gave me. Well, what is it you're reading that you seem to like? And he began to read, take no anxious thought, what you shall eat and what you shall drink. Your heavenly Father knoweth you have need of these things. Well, he said, let's take turns reading that. And they read the Bible, and they read the Bible, and they got peace of mind. And a bird came clear out there thousands of miles and fed them one day. 17 days later, the old Texan, the only one that knew how to pray, said, well, old master, it looks like we'll have to die if you don't send us some food. And they sent a dozen fish leaped into their boats. And due to a flare that went down and hit near a boat, went into the school of fish. And all these miracles happened. When you can get peace of mind when the ship's going down, There's always in some neighborhood when things are terrible, find that person. When my wife and I first went to St. Paul, we didn't have any babies, or we just had been married. She came down with typhoid fever, bed for 9 weeks in the hospital. One day she's going to live. The next day the doctor said she's going to die. I'd hurry from my hospital back to college, back to my lonely apartment building, up to the hospital. Sometimes they'd call me in the middle of the night that she was dying, and then I'd run all the way. I was a mile runner, ran a whole mile, get there panting and find that she'd come through. Well, the strain was so terrific, beyond endurance. So I went to church every Sunday. I went from one church to another, and I tell this when I meet with the ministers. I tell them I wasn't looking for a great eloquence or a great church building. I was looking for a man who's described in the 2nd verse of the 32nd chapter of Isaiah. And a man shall be as a covert from the wind, as a shelter from the storm, as rivers of water in a dry place, and as the shadow of a mighty rock in a weary land. I wanted, when this terrific sweeps of the tornado of fear had come on me, I wanted to come and just sit down beside a man that had peace. And I didn't find him. Went from church to church. And then I said, if I can't, someday, if I live long enough, I want to make myself that man. And these camps, where many of you folks, you'll find that people call you in. If you just come in, it calms us down to have you in this room. Oh, I want to say there's where the saints are needed. Love and yet have the peace that passes understanding. Well, now above there, you love with all. God, you love that word all. Jesus loved that word. Now there's tension there, all your mind and all your heart and all your strength and all your soul. Well, that would drive you into a state hospital if you kept that tension, enthusiasm all the time. But now you must get still. And underneath that line, you'll find it says, take no anxious thought what you shall eat. That's for the body. And what you shall drink. And when you're called into judgment, take no anxious thought what you shall say. It'll be given you in that hour, what you shall say. And then relinquishment, unless you're willing to relinquish your father and your mother and your sisters and your brothers and your houses and your lands for the kingdom's sake, you're not worthy of the kingdom. But if you're willing to relinquish all these things for the kingdom's sake, not only will you receive the kingdom, but you'll receive the father and the mother and the sisters and the brothers and the house and the lands. And then that take no anxious thought for those that you cherish, that you love. Don't need to worry about them. If they go to heaven, that'll be wonderful too. Have peace of mind no matter, even though you lose the things that you cherish, and there you have that perfect balance. Now, if you have all those 4 qualities, you're well educated, and I'll be giving you the diploma now that the course is over. But I'm going to ask you now to relax while they change the reels.